Alright, let's look at a couple more of these and we'll go to some trig. When you look at this first one, you have the limit as x approaches negative infinity. Looking at your powers, I see the higher powers in the top. So if the higher power's in the top, you use your rules, and your higher power in the top says your answer is either positive infinity or negative infinity, do more work. Okay, I have a little bit more room on this one, which is a great thing. It's easier to explain. So do more work means take your bigger terms. So my biggest term on the top is this one, and my biggest term on the bottom one is this one. So I only want to analyze what happens at those terms. So 4x to the 8th over 2x to the 6th looks like this, and I can simplify it down. That would give me a 2x squared. Now once I get there, I have to decide, is this value going to negative infinity or positive infinity? Since it's going to negative infinity, I need to plug in a negative number and look at the sign. If I plug in a negative number into this, 2 times a negative number squared. Okay, what's a negative number squared? Two negatives make a positive, right? So this would be 2 times a positive number, which would give you a positive result. So since you're going to get a positive result here, that means your answer would be positive infinity. And that's how that one would work. Okay, your last one you see over here, you can actually break the limit down into all three pieces. First of all, if you have the limit of a constant, 5, that limit is just 5. Looking at your second term, it looks like this, 1 over x. Remember, if you have if your largest term's in the denominator, your limit is 0. Looking at the last one, my largest power here is again in the denominator. If my largest power of x is in my denominator, that would be 0. So your limit for this one would be 5 plus 0 plus 0. So that means your limit would be 5. And that's how that one would go. Okay, looking at this one, let's keep the cosines, let's do those a little bit later. So looking at this top one, you have x cubed plus 8. Your highest power is in the top because that's your only power. So if your highest power is in top, you know your answer is either positive infinity or negative infinity. So you have to plug in a value. I notice that this one's going to positive infinity. So that means we need to plug in a positive number. If you plug in a positive number cubed plus 8 would give you a positive result. So since that equals a positive result, that means you're going to be taking positive infinity. Okay, let's jump to this bottom one. My highest power on the top is 2, and my highest power on the bottom is 1. So again, I'm telling you that your highest power is in the top. If your highest power is in the top, it's either going to be positive infinity or negative infinity. Alright, so let's look at our leading terms. Now my leading term in the top would be x squared, and my leading term in the bottom is negative x. So I'm taking the limit as x approaches infinity of x squared over negative x. Cleaning that up, that's the limit as x approaches infinity of negative x. Okay, because I simplified that out. X squared over x would give me 1x left over. The result is negative. Now, if I plug in a positive number into this expression, I would get negative 1 times a positive number. Well, a negative times a positive would be a negative result. So that means the answer to this one would be negative infinity. Now, we're going to save the top one for last. Looking at this next one, I'm taking the limit as x goes to infinity. I want to write it a little differently. Now forget the cosine for just a second, just look at the x part, the fraction. I know that as x goes to infinity, if I have a larger power on the bottom, that means that part's going to go to 0. So this would be the cosine of 0. 1 over x squared would give you 0 there. Now, I know that the cosine of 0 is 1. And so that's how that particular one would work. The cosine of 0 is 1. Now at the top, you have a tricky one. So you've got the cosine of theta over theta squared. Now it's hard to see when it's written so small. Now what you have to know about cosine is cosine has a graph that usually it starts high and goes low and comes back, and it makes a little wave that looks something like that. Well, what you know about cosine is it has to lie between 1 and -1. So when you graph a regular cosine graph back in trig days, if you graph a cosine graph, it has to lie between 1 and -1. So let's talk about this again. Remember, cosine's value has to lie between 1 and -1. So the highest value that cosine could possibly have is 1. On the bottom, though, you have infinity. So, since you have infinity on the bottom, and the highest value this top would be, it would kind of look like you had this, 1 over infinity squared. Since your highest power is in the bottom, that means that this is going to give you a 0 result.